Hello and welcome back to Mr. Cho's Bio Lessons. Today we are going to talk about 6.3, how are blood vessels adapted to their functions. Two learning outcomes: relate the structure of arteries, veins and capillaries to their function, and describe the transfer of materials between capillaries and tissue fluid. So have you ever seen ships carrying cargo as they enter and leave the docks at the port? That is quite similar to how blood enters and leaves our hearts. So we're going to learn about the parts of the circulatory system. We know that blood is used to transport various substances from one part of the body to another by flowing continuously around the body. These examples could be oxygen, glucose, or carbon dioxide and urea. In vertebrates, the blood flows through a closed system of blood vessels called the circulatory system. This blood flow is called blood circulation. The word vertebrate means creatures with spines or backbone. Humans are vertebrates. So this figure shows a human circulatory system. And there are 6 main parts here, starting with the hearts. Okay, so the heart, very big organ, right, about the size of your fist, mainly made from muscles and a bit of fats and other tissues. Then with the arteries, where blood will flow from the heart towards the various tissues. The arteries will eventually split into arterioles, which are basically smaller arteries. These arterioles will then split again into capillaries, and this is where the exchange of nutrients and oxygens will happen. So nutrients and oxygens will enter into the cells over here in the white spaces, and in return the cells will give them back carbon dioxide and other waste products such as urea. And these waste products will then enter the capillaries, go into the venules, which will then combine back again into the veins, and then be carried back towards the heart, all the way back into the chambers of the heart. Okay, and this is known as your blood circulation. Now, even though these veins are colored in blue, it is important to remember that human blood is not blue. It's simply colored this way to represent deoxygenated blood. Okay, so it's just a darker red instead of blue. Okay, let's talk about the 6 parts of the blood vessels or the circulatory system. Firstly, the hearts. Blood is kept circulating throughout the body by means of a muscular pump, which is the hearts. When the heart relaxes, it fills up with blood. When it contracts, the blood is squeezed out with great force. The blood then circulates through the blood vessels, which direct the blood flow around the body. Okay, so as you can see here, the heart is about the size of your fist. When it contracts, it squeezes blood out through this part known as aorta, and then down towards the other arteries. Okay, let's talk about arteries now. The blood vessels that carry blood away from the heart are called arteries. The large artery that leaves the left side of the heart is the aorta. It branches to form smaller arteries. Now, when we are looking at a picture of a heart, we must be reminded that this is a mirror image. Alright, so as we can see over here, if you were to split this heart into 2, like we draw an imaginary line, we will call this area as your left side. Okay, although on the book or on the screen it looks like it's on the right? But you must remember it's a mirror image. Okay, so this is actually the left side of the heart, and this is actually the right side of the heart. Okay, so they said about this thing called the aorta. The aorta is the largest artery in our body. Right, it's about the size of a garden hose, which is about this size. It's actually quite large. Okay, as you can see, this here is the aorta. Right, it is connected to the chambers of the heart, namely the left ventricle, which we will learn about soon, and the left ventricle will pump blood into the aorta, where it will then flow to the rest of the body, right? Some of it goes up to the head, some of it goes down to the feet, and even a little bit of the blood goes back towards the heart through this thing known as the coronary artery, and it supplies the heart with its own blood flow, right? Enough oxygen and nutrients for the blood to pump and to beat. So that is arteries. Now let's talk about arterioles. Arterioles branch to form, the arteries branch to form tiny vessels called arterioles, and the arterioles will divide, and ultimately their branches will become the tiny blood vessels called capillaries. Blood capillaries. Capillaries are microscopic blood vessels that are found between the cells of almost all tissue. They have walls made of only a single layer of flattened cells, as shown in this figure. We can see there is a few adaptations in the capillaries to help them perform their function. Firstly, the capillary walls are partially permeable. They enable certain substances to diffuse quickly through them. So there's a very short diffusion distance between the blood and the cells over here. Right, so these capillaries, it's easy for the oxygen and nutrients such as glucose to move through the capillary walls and get to the cells over here. Because there are numerous branches, they provide a large surface area for the exchange of substances between the blood and the tissue cells. When an arteriole branches into many capillaries, the total cross-sectional area of the blood vessels increases, and this lowers the blood pressure in the capillaries. Even though the flow of blood is slowing down, it actually gives more time for the exchange of substances. So what does that mean? It means that blood is moving through the capillary relatively slowly. Okay, but this slowness allows the nutrients, right, to enter into the cells, and likewise for the waste products to enter back into the blood flow. Okay, so let's talk about venules. Venules are what happens when the capillaries combine again, and so they will unite to form small vessels called venules. And these venules would join back to form bigger veins, and the veins would carry blood back to the hearts. Alright, so in Sec 2 you may have learned about two exceptions, right? So we know that all arteries will carry blood away from the heart. That is the rule of the artery. It must carry blood away from the heart. Right? Some people may have this misconception that arteries always carry oxygenated blood, and they are always represented in this red color. That is not true. Right? There is one artery called the pulmonary artery that does not carry oxygenated blood. Instead, it carries deoxygenated blood, and it doesn't carry the blood. It carries the blood away from the heart. Okay, but in this case, it's very special. It carries the blood from the heart towards the lungs, where it needs to be, where there'll be gas exchange happening in the lungs, and the oxygen will enter from the lungs into our bloodstream. Okay, so that's a kind of like a rare exception. The pulmonary arteries is the only artery that actually carries deoxygenated blood instead of oxygenated blood, but it also carries blood away from the heart, so it fulfills the criteria of being an artery. Likewise, there is this vein called the pulmonary vein, which is carrying oxygenated blood back towards the heart. It fulfills the criteria of carrying blood back towards the heart, so we can call it as a vein. Okay, let's talk about arteries, right, in more detail. So each of these blood vessels, they are adapted towards their own function, right? For example, arteries, they receive blood directly from the heart. So when the heart pumps, it creates a very high pressure, right? Basically, you can think of it as like a big tsunami of blood is moving into the arteries. And so they need to be able to withstand that high pressure of the blood forced out of the heart. The blood that flows through the arteries is very fast moving. So arteries must be thick, muscular, and elastic. Okay, you must highlight these three words and you must use them together. Arteries have walls that are thick, muscular, and elastic. They are thick and muscular to resist and withstand the high pressure of blood flowing through them. And they are elastic also to be able to expand to fit to the size of the blood flowing through them also. Okay, so as you can see, the elastic layer is much thicker in the arteries nearest to the heart, right? For example, the aorta, which is in the picture behind over here. The aorta is basically the largest artery in the whole body. It is the thickest, most muscular, and most elastic of them all. So as we were saying, this thick elastic wall helps to withstand the high blood pressure in the artery. The elasticity enables the artery wall to stretch and recoil or spring back. This helps to push the blood in spurts along the artery and also gives rise to the pulse. Right? The word pulse is basically you can feel the movement of blood through your body. Okay, you can try it. This is known as your carotid pulse. You just put your fingers right beside your windpipe or your trachea, and you can feel your heart beating if you stop talking. Okay, another way is, of course, you can feel it on your wrist too, although this one is a bit harder for some people. Okay, so this contraction and relaxation of muscles in the arterial wall brings about constriction and dilation of the artery. When an artery constricts, its lumen becomes narrower and less blood flows through it per unit time. On the other hand, when an artery dilates, its lumen becomes wider and more blood flows through it per unit time. Okay, so the word lumen is the empty space in any blood vessel. Okay, it also applies to your digestive system, right? So the lumen in your small intestine, the lumen in your large intestine. Okay, so it's just an empty space. As you can see, there's a very thick, this is the muscle in pink. It's very muscular and it is also elastic. So arteries carry oxygenated blood except for the pulmonary arteries, which carry deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs. And eventually, arteries will branch to form arterioles. Now, in general, most arteries are quite nice looking. Like, they look round and everything. And they have a very even shape, right? As compared to the veins, the lumen is not as big as the veins. Okay, so if you compare to the veins over here, the internal diameter for the arteries is not as much as the veins. Okay, so let's now talk about veins. Okay, veins, they transport blood towards the heart. That's the keyword over here, towards. The blood pressure in veins is much lower than the blood pressure in the arteries. Do you know why? Right, this is because the blood pressure in arteries is because it's right beside the heart, right? The heart pumps blood directly into the arteries. Whereas for the veins, the blood has already flowed through the arterioles, the capillaries, the venules, and then it's pulling back in the veins. So the pressure is not as high. Blood is actually flowing slowly and more smoothly in the veins as compared to the arteries, where arteries is like a constant pulse or movement. The blood in vein actually moves quite smoothly. So the walls in the veins do not need to be as thick and muscular as those in the arteries, okay, of similar size. Okay, so here we have a cross-section of a vein. As you can see, the wall is thinner, it is less muscular and less elastic as compared to an artery. Furthermore, veins have this thing known as valves. So most veins have internal valves along their length to prevent backflow of blood. What does that mean? It means that there's this little structure, right, similar to some taps where they have an open and close thing. This only allows blood to flow in one direction. It prevents blood from going backwards, and this is called preventing the backflow of blood. So most veins have this valve, and it's important, right, to keep the blood flowing back towards your heart. So as you can see here, when blood moves past the valve will open briefly to allow blood to flow through. After that, the valve will close again, right? It closes very tightly, and this prevents any backflow of blood. Okay, so they just cut the vein open to show the valves. It looks like that. So this is a like micrograph of a transverse section of an artery and vein. Transverse means from the top. You're looking at it from above. Okay, so which is the artery and which is the vein? The one on the left would be your vein, and the one on the right would be your artery. Not too sure what all these things are in between them. Okay, let's talk about the artery here. As you can see, the shape looks quite regular, right? You can see that the size of the muscular wall, right, is very thick. So a thick, elastic, right, muscular wall. Whereas if you compare to the vein, it's a thinner, less muscular, and less elastic wall. However, in general, the lumen is slightly wider. Now, veins carry deoxygenated blood, except for the pulmonary vein, which carries oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart, and they are formed when venules join together. Okay, let me see if I should emphasize anything. Never mind, I'll tell you in class. Okay, let's just move on and let's talk about capillaries. So, where's the capillaries? Did I miss it? No. Okay, this is what they have about capillaries. Okay, so capillaries, right? They are adapted to their function of exchanging tissue fluid. So these tiny spaces between the tissue cells contain a certain liquid, colorless liquid called tissue fluid. This fluid will transport dissolved substances between the tissue cells and the blood capillaries. Dissolved food substances and oxygen diffuse from the blood in the blood capillaries into the tissue fluid. They then move into the cell. Metabolic or excretory waste products diffuse from the cell into the tissue fluid. They are then transferred through the blood capillary walls into the blood. The blood transports these waste products to the excretory organs for removal. This movement of substances are shown in the figure. So here we can see the blood capillary and a bunch of cells which are called the tissue. So the red blood cell, it binds to oxygen, right, using its hemoglobin, and when it's near to cells or tissue that is very low in oxygen content, right, there will be a very steep concentration gradient of oxygen in the capillaries versus in the tissue fluid. Therefore, there will be a diffusion of oxygen out of the red blood cells and into the tissue fluid, and eventually it will make its way into the cell. Okay, likewise for food substances such as glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, glycerol, these are all capable of diffusing out of the cell, out of the blood, and into the cells over here. Something cool about white blood cells is that they can actually squeeze through the capillaries to protect our body from infection. You can fight diseases and such in the tissue fluid. So, of course, as the cells are respiring, one of the waste products of respiration is carbon dioxide. So these excretory waste products will then be sent back into the blood capillaries through diffusion again, and then it will be carried back, through the venules, then back into the veins, and finally back into the heart, then out into the lungs, and then it will exhale out the carbon dioxide. Okay, so let's do some practice questions. Think about this. What are the types of blood vessels that make up the circulatory system? Okay, so we will have 5 of them. All right, so the arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. Why do arteries have thick muscular and elastic walls? All right, this is so that they can withstand the very high pressure that comes from the pumping of the hearts. Why do veins contain valves? This is to prevent backflow of blood. And describe the relationship. Okay, some of the rest you can do. You can try it yourself. And let's just quickly run through question 5. Okay, so question 5 says there's an arm of a person with one vein visible on the surface. Small swellings, A, B, C, D, appear along the vein, and these are caused by the presence of valves. Another person placed 2 fingers at point X. One finger remained at point X. Huh? I'm confused. Okay, another person placed 2 fingers at point X. Step 2. And then the other finger stroked the vein as far as point Y and was immediately lifted. Okay. So when the finger was lifted, why did the blood flow back from Y to C and no further? Huh? When the finger was lifted, why did the blood flow back from Y to C and no further? Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, obviously, because there's a valve present in C lah. Okay, so why was the part of the vein between B and C no longer visible? This part, is it? Okay, perhaps this area is the part there's no valve, so the blood would not be visible there lah. What did this experiment demonstrate? It demonstrates that valves prevent backflow of blood. Okay, let's pause here for a while. Okay, continue. I wanted to show you a picture or video of 2 types of blood. So here we can see a syringe, 2 syringes with 2 different types of blood. And I'm sure that you can make an educated guess. And what's on the left will be your venous blood. It's actually not blue. It's a very dark red. And the reason why is because of the lack of oxygen. Right? So oxygen, when it binds to the hemoglobin in the red blood cells, it tends to form a bit of a brighter color, like this, as we can see in the arterial blood over here. Okay, so I'm sure when you see this needle, some of you might be a bit scared of it. Okay, let's just see what's
Hi,
happening.
good morning. A very short video to see what is the difference between an arterial sample and a venous sample. The reddish sample that you can see, the above one is an arterial sample and the below one is a venous sample, which is dark in color. So the most important difference is the color. The arterial sample is too much bright red in color and the venous sample is dark in color. A very small video to clear the concept.
Okay, thank you. So now we're also gonna watch this one. Okay, all right. So yeah, sorry, I forgot to warn you. This is a cadaver. Cadavers are dead bodies lah. Okay, they are usually donated to science. So how are veins and arteries different? Let's watch this video and find out.
Blood back to the heart, but you have to Veins such as this one right here are going to return blood back to the heart, but you have to understand that the heart really only provides pressure through these arteries, such as the ascending aorta here. There's not much pressure inside of veins that's coming from the heart. It's a very small amount of pressure. So in order for the blood to get back to the heart, there are tiny little one-way valves inside of the veins. And so what happens as skeletal muscle contracts, so you can maybe picture like biceps brachii behind the vein there contracting, that's going to help push blood up the vein. And then as the muscle rests, there's going to be that one-way valve preventing backflow. And the net result of all the muscles from all over your body contracting and moving is going to help assist that minimal pressure to bring blood eventually back to your heart.
Okay, so what we saw in the video was the veins. There are all these valves in the vein. So as you're actually moving, you're walking and moving your muscles, it actually helps to bring blood back up to your heart again. Okay, so that's why we shouldn't be lazy. We actually need to do a bit of exercise and walk around on a daily basis to help our blood flow. Okay, if we don't do that, then our blood flow will be quite weak and a lot of blood will be put inside our body. We can even get this condition known as varicose vein. Okay, so what is varicose vein? Let me show you quickly. Varicose vein. Varicose vein happens when the valves. Okay, so as you can see, a normal vein, right, has the valves, right? There's a normal valve, it prevents backflow. But in varicose veins, the valves are damaged and they don't really prevent backflow of blood properly. In fact, there can be some blood that's pooling inside the veins itself. So there's a lot of blood here. It's not able to flow properly. This often happens when people maybe they stand for too long without good rest, and they don't rest their legs properly, or they don't move enough on a daily on a daily basis. Okay, so just want to show you one last video of the difference between arteries and veins. As you can see, there are two blood vessels here. Right, one looks like this, one looks like this. Make a guess which is the vein, which is the artery. Okay, and if you said the one on the left is your vein, that's correct. The one on the right is artery. As you can see, the vein is slightly wider. However, you can clearly see that there's lesser muscle, right? This pinkish substance or pinkish thing is the muscle. So the arteries, they have a thicker, more muscular, and more elastic as compared to the veins, but the veins have valves inside. Okay, this white thing over here is a nerve. Let's watch the video.
Left upper thigh in this triangular area called the femoral triangle. Now the femoral triangle is a busy little area, got some important structures in here like the femoral vein, the femoral artery, and this awesome nerve called the femoral nerve. And if we follow it, you can see it starts to branch, because what it's going to do is go to the various muscles of the anterior thigh, like the quadriceps. And so this nerve helps control or send signals to those muscles so you can do things like extend your knee. Let's take a look at the left upper.
Okay, yeah, so anyway, you're just talking about vein, artery, and there's this nerve also. Okay, and with that, let's pause the video here, and we'll continue on in the next lesson with 6.4. Okay, right, go and study hard, and all the best. See you in school. Bye.